We are at the military base of Brittany, in the suburbs of Paris. Antoine, a 23-year-old lieutenant, is about to go through an experience that all future fighter pilots dread.
Close your eyes. Breathe normally. Relax completely.
Blood pressure, electrocardiogram, all his vitals are thoroughly inspected.
You need to be in perfect physical condition in order to withstand the accelerations.
Today, Antoine is taking the Centrifuge test. He's been a student officer for 4 years and dreams of one day piloting a fighter jet.
You need to be a little patient. I've been at it for years now, and there's still more work to be done.
Antoine will have to withstand accelerations of up to 6 Gs, 6 times his weight.
The ECG is perfect.
The electrodes placed on his chest will allow the doctor to monitor his reactions during the test.
Thank you.
What are these bags?
It's for if you need to vomit.
Like Antoine, each year about 100 pilots come here to test their limits.
Authorization to launch.
His mission is to prevent future pilots from fainting. 3 French pilots died over the last 15 years because they fainted mid-flight.
2, 1, engage.
As part of a filmed exercise, this American pilot will have to withstand 9 Gs, 9 times his weight. The higher the pressure climbs, the more deformed his face. He ends up fainting. In order to avoid this type of situation mid-flight, the Air Force has designed breathing techniques that minimize the effects of accelerations. Antoine gets into the centrifuge.
My goal is to come out of this alive.
It's the student pilot's first time.
Ready to start. 3, 2, 1, launch.
In the control room, the chief physician guides him through his breathing exercises. Antoine contracts his ribcage in order to boost his blood flow. He must avoid a narrowing of his vision field, or worse, a blackout.
Is there a faint veil or no?
Nope, not yet.
Let me know when it starts.
I think it's starting now.
3.5 G. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 4 G. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. Keep going.
After a whole minute at full speed, Antoine still hasn't lost consciousness. Despite what the look on his face says, the pilot trainee held on.
He withstood 6G for 20 to 30 seconds. He succeeded because his anti-G breathing exercises were perfect. He's totally made for the job.
A successful mission for Antoine.
Yes, that's good. The sensations are good. Can we go again or not?
Before officially becoming fighter pilots in the Air Force, the young recruits are tested and trained daily to prepare for war.
It's important for me to defend my country's values. There are people who give up their life to do it, and I'm very happy to be able to do so.
France has 900 active fighter pilots, deployed in the Sahel and the Middle East. They fight wars from the air, mostly against ISIS terrorists. Quentin and Talia were recruited after passing the entrance exams of prestigious engineering schools. They are barely starting their training in the Air Force. Their goal is to pass all their classes in order to reach the ceremony of the daggers, a rite of passage that will make them officers. But it's also possible to become a fighter pilot with just no more than a high school degree. Jean-Charles, who's been a student pilot for a year, follows this lesser-known but just as demanding path.
Work can stop at any time. We're always on the hot seat.
We will live his very first flight aboard a Rafale, the last generation of fighter jets, from the inside.
We're gonna do a barrel roll. You ready?
That's nuts.
After 6 years of training, Richie, captain, is finishing his training on the Alpha Jet, the Patrouille de France plane.
Now the goal is to learn how to fire.
To get his wings, he will have to face crisis situations, like the crash of his plane at sea. Pierre, 30 years old, blurred for security reasons, will live his first mission at the heart of a fight against terrorism in Africa.
That's it. Off on real war assignments.
For several months, we've followed these young student pilots from the Air Force. How are they selected, trained to fly, and prepared for battle? Immersion into the hero factory. For future pilots, the adventure often starts in a small airfield.
We're gonna put all this over there.
We are near Grenoble. Here are a father and his son. They often fly in this tiny plane, but today is a different outing from the usual.
We're ready for our last flight together. Let's listen to the tower and close the glass roof.
Quentin is 20 years old. Tomorrow, he's leaving the region for the prestigious flight school with one dream in mind: to one day fly a fighter jet. His father, Eric, is a former lieutenant colonel of the Air Force, and he gave him the passion.
This is our office every day. As you can see, the view always changes. It really is a pleasure.
Of course, when you fly, your passion for it grows more and more, and I decided to do it for a living.
A lifelong pilot, serving France, like his father 30 years earlier, Quentin is getting ready to leave.
This is my father's uniform. You can see the Legion of Honor, the Aeronautics Medal. Ever since I was a little boy, I've seen my dad wearing this, and I thought, that's an achievement. It's my childhood dream.
In order to get into flight school, Quentin had to work hard. 3 years of scientific preparatory classes. Ever since he was a little boy, his walls have been covered with posters of planes. He's had only one goal: becoming a fighter pilot.
To be honest, having passed that entrance exam is freeing. Of course, it's not going to be all fun and games, but I can't wait for it to begin.
The first day of the rest of his life is tomorrow, so Quentin is preparing his suitcase.
A padlock, a frontal lamp, and a watch lighting up at night. Check. A lighter, a sewing kit.
There's no room for improvisation. The engineer students are going to start the year with a tough military training.
During these 2 months, we have no phones, no internet. I don't know if we're gonna sleep in bedrooms. Not all the time, it seems, so we have to have the basics.
In order to get into flight school, Quentin passed a very selective entrance exam. 80% of candidates fail.
Let's do this. You want to open it?
Listen, I think Quentin is going to open it.
Right?
Being a former officer himself, Eric doesn't hide his pride.
I was class of '86 at the military flight school, so if my math is right, it was 30 years ago. You did well. I'm very happy about it. Proud. Over the moon. All the adjectives you can think of. It's perfect. To you. Cheers.
Like Quentin this year, they are about 100 to join the ranks of this elite military school. Based in the south of France, in Salon-de-Provence. Since 1935, the school has been training the future officers of the Air Force. That's where the first step of the fighter pilot's training takes place. Salon de Provence is also the home of the famous Patrouille de France. Quite the environment for the freshmen to spread their wings. Today is the first day of school for the new recruits, and it's time to receive their keys. Here, there is no dormitory, but small individual rooms. Student officers are the elite of the Air Force, so they're spoiled.
I guess I have to check that everything is in working order.
Quentin inspects the place.
It looks like the faucet isn't working. I told you it wasn't going to be fancy.
For the next 3 years, this school will be his home. Him and his classmates will first train away from the planes. They will learn rigor and discipline, so they can one day become chiefs in the Air Force. They're headed to the welcome picnic, organized by the second-year students.
When you leave, I don't want to see anything on the ground. No paper, no water bottle, no breadcrumbs, nothing.
They have 10 minutes to eat and are strictly prohibited from talking to the person next to them.
We're getting into it right away, so yes, it's a bit harsh, but at least we're not starving.
Talia is getting acquainted with military hospitality. She studied political science, and like Quentin, she decided to become a fighter pilot.
That way we can show that women are capable of doing just as good as men, and also to pave the way for other women who might want to get into that profession.
Today, there are about 15 women in the Air Force. Talia grew up in the suburbs of Paris. Her dad was employed in a factory, and her mom worked in restaurants. After brilliant studies, she chose to join the army at 22. Yet this track and field champion does not come from a military family. For her, the symbolic passage from civilian to military life will take place in this hallway.
What's your size?
37.
This afternoon, Talia will receive her new clothes, which includes the traditional pilot jacket. But the fitting is a bit more complicated than initially planned, because Talia must keep her 2 military notebooks on her person at all times.
We're supposed to always have them on us except for showers. I think it's the only exception. And some instructors told us there are balls. That's their little nickname.
In the very masculine world of fighter pilots, she's going to have to establish herself. But Talia has been determined about this from a very young age.
I've always wanted to work in security, to feel like you're useful, and also because I feel close to the values of this world, like order, respect for authority, etc. Have a good day.
Military codes also include the military haircut. Quentin happens to have an appointment with the hairdresser of the base. His hair is already short, but it doesn't matter. It's mandatory.
The military haircut. We do 6 millimeters on top and 3 on the sides. We remove the sideburns. For the efforts they're about to make, short hair is ideal.
The first day is like a marathon for these young recruits. It's like a race to standardize them. After the hairdresser, we're heading to the tailor. At flight school, the officer uniforms are touched up one by one.
We only have one model, and we have to dress all of the body shapes that come through here. Tall, skinny, short, bulky.
It's sort of like getting into your father's jacket.
Well, it's not my father's jacket, but an officer's jacket first, and then who knows?
This school is also a school of patience. The first trimester is solely about military training. Quentin and Talia are going to have to fit into the Army's mold. These military chants aren't really adapted to women being in the Army now, are they?
Not really, but I don't think it's the moment to complain.
For 3 years, these students are going to have to walk the line and become engineers. Flying will come later. "8,500 kilometers away from here, in Indre-et-Loire, the school base of Tours. Richie left Salon de Provence 2 years ago. He now wears a pilot suit, because finally he flies a fighter jet.
I'm the first on the right.
In this school, there are no collective classes, but one-on-one briefings with an instructor.
So for the act check, it's 8
And in English.
30-second stop. We expect to step in around 30 minutes for a takeoff at 8.
Pardon me, Captain, but are we in the French or American Army?
For our very first years in the Army, our first flights, from the briefing to the debriefing, everything is in English.
So we will perform the close formation takeoff.
All right.
English is the language used for external operations. Pilots must therefore become bilingual, but their learning methods are sometimes unexpected.
We explain a lot of exercises with these planes to show them lines of flight, the position to take, the points of reference for the different formations. These are our everyday toys.
Their everyday is quite out of the ordinary. It requires mandatory protection accessories, like these anti-gravity pants.
It enables us to resist more easily to the weight factors for tighter progressions.
It's during turns that acceleration is the strongest, which is when the pants inflate to send the blood back towards the pilot's brain.
Did you get fatter, Richie, or what?
A little bit, Captain. We eat well here.
Today, Richie is doing his mission on a legendary jet, the Alpha Jet.
And we're off.
Every Bastille Day, these Alpha Jets fly above us. Because before piloting a Rafale, it's on the Patrouille de France planes that all young pilots train. They call it the Toy.
It's an affectionate nickname because it's a plane that marked generations of pilots.
After 90 hours of flight on this plane, Richie now has all the reflexes of a real pro.
So before the flight, we visually inspect the plane, we test everything a little bit to check that there are no open hatches, there is no foreign body on the plane. The pilot is responsible for the plane during the flight, and so he has to verify that everything is in order before leaving. It's all good.
Richie finished his training in Tours. Today is his last flight at this school. The next day, he takes time off. It is in fact Richie under that helmet and behind these glasses.
Hi, honey.
His parents are shopkeepers in the ski resort of Les Deux Alpes. The pilot grew up here. Today, Richie is enjoying one of his rare leaves to get a scenery change and enjoy the trails.
It's amazing to be able to come back here, recharge your batteries, and spend some time on the snow. Are you guys okay?
Several of his friends have become skiing teachers in this region. Richie himself thought about going into this profession. When they meet up, these friends act like old times and ski as a group. Richie only comes back home 3 or 4 times a year. So every time he does,
How about a drink?
he makes a necessary stop at the town's bar. Among his friends, Richie finds his fiancée, Carolyn, and his parents.
When he turned 16, I asked him, "What do you prefer, a moped or a pilot's license?" He couldn't drive. He was already able to fly a plane on his own.
It was 10 years ago. Since then, Carol, his mother, got used to the risks of the job.
I'd rather know him in a fighter jet than in a car as a salesperson. I think I prefer him up there.
Why?
I think there's less odds of something happening to him up there than on the road.
Confident, Carol is also in good company. Her future daughter-in-law is also an officer in the Air Force, specialized in radars.
I'm one of the links in a chain.
Us pilots are at the end of the chain, but there are tons of specializations that are needed, like Caroline's, to make our planes fly.
Carolyn is posted in Nancy, about 1,000 kilometers away from Richie. The couple can only see each other once or twice a month.
Let's say that this training period where he's moving around every 6 or 8 months, we know that it's temporary.
And almost over, too.
Almost over, yes. We're almost done crossing out the months in the calendar.
Since she's also in the Army, she understands better what my job requires, the obligations related to operations, missions, availability, transfers.
Like Richie, Carolyn could be called to war one day.
I think it's something that we've both accepted because we'll be really happy to see each other after.
Who will take care of the kids?
But if we're both leaving at the same time, we'll give in to the grandparents. They'll be happy in the mountains.
The couple shares the same sense of duty. But Richie is the only one who will have the burden of dropping bombs.
Can you picture yourself going into your plane, which is now equipped with a cannon pod?
In this gym, at the airbase of Cazaux in the Gironde, Richie is deep in a top session, a technique to maximize his potential.
I place myself in front of the target. I wait for the authorization to shoot.
Relaxation is meant to help memorize the procedures.
This time you have weapons.
Today, Richie must bomb a target. His eyes remain closed, but his fingers move like they would during an actual flight.
I lock my target with the hair-cross sight.
Pascal's voice is guiding him. As a mental trainer for 20 years, Pascal has been part of a small revolution within the Air Force by adding a psychological aspect to the pilot's training.
It was particularly hard at the beginning because
Why?
It's often been considered a sign of weakness to need a mental trainer to have a successful mission. It wasn't really accepted as part of the fighter's pilot's customs for a long time, and now we finally understand how helpful it is.
Despite the mental repetition, nothing prepares these young people to the reality of killing an enemy.
It's true that it's part of our job. We must keep that in the back of our head, but as of today, I'm not focused on that. It'll come in due time. But what you need to understand is that we aren't killing machines either. We're the armed part of a policy. In the end, we're just implementing the decision of the French government.
Deployed in 10 countries on 3 continents, the French Army is in a dire need of a fighter pilot. What the general public often doesn't know is that the majority of them are not postgraduate students. Most only graduated high school. Back to the flight school of Salon de Provence. Here, two training paths are possible. The elite, pilot engineers, who will become chiefs of the Air Force, and simple pilots, only trained to fly, like Jean-Charles. What are you currently doing, Jean-Charles?
I'm preparing for the upcoming mission. That is a log recap. It enables us to do checks on the most important parts of the mission, and so in theory we know everything by heart, but if at some point during the mission we're in a rush, we just have to look down and we have the key points. When you start to check, the mission is not going well.
And now, do you feel ready?
We'll see, but normally we don't take missions lightly, that's for sure.
Jean-Charles started training 18 months ago. Before getting on a fighter jet, it's first on this little plane that students learn to fly.
The mission is about to start, so we're focused on that, the mission and the necessary procedures.
This morning, they're doing a navigation test with his instructor.
Okay. 88 knots, 150 feet. We're good.
The pilot trainee must follow a very precise itinerary by using outside points of reference as much as possible.
Let's get the map out.
Don't look down at the map too much, because then you're not looking outside.
In 11 minutes, we should identify a highway with,
What's your big point of reference?
It's Lunel, which is here, a highway that's coming up from the south.
Second difficulty, the calculation of how much fuel is left.
Just tell me how much is 43 minus 17?
43?
Minus 17.
The result is important because during a mission, a fuel calculation error can be lethal.
In the beginning, flying low at 500 feet requires a lot of focus on their part. They often have trouble staying on course, and they also make calculation mistakes.
Several times a week, Jean-Charles takes tests aboard this small plane. It will be like that for another year. Then, the Army will decide whether or not to entrust him with a fighter jet.
We know that we're on the hot seat all the time and that the job can stop at any moment.
To blow off steam, the pilot trainees often meet up outside of the base. Tonight, Jean-Charles and his class buddies are headed to the go-kart circuit. They come from all over France.
Drinks on the last one.
Their backgrounds are varied. It goes from the 18-year-old who just graduated high school to others who are older and doing a career change, like Jean-Charles. He shares his predictions for the race.
I think that Garni's going to finish first. He was 16th at the French karting championships, and Yantis will finish last, who still doesn't have his driver's license after 2 tries.
In order to become a fighter pilot, a driver's license isn't required, but a perfect vision is mandatory, and the medical exam of the selection is thorough.
Well, because I'm a bit older, I don't want a youngster to own me.
Jean-Charles is the oldest of the class, so tonight his honor is at stake. Gifts are out of the question, even among brothers in arms. Jean-Charles forces through. The pilot without a license finishes dead last, to no one's surprise.
Hey, drinks are on Yannis.
I forgot my wallet.
Uprooted, away from their families, the students have become friends.
We're really tight. It's great. It's our second family. It's important to get along.
He's the most emotional of the class.
Tomorrow, Jean-Charles will leave his friends. He will join a fighter pilot squadron and live his first flight aboard a Rafale. Next up, the east of France, the airbase of Saint-Dizier. It's Jean-Charles' hometown. Today he meets a childhood friend who's been a pilot for 10 years.
Hello, Jean-Charles. Did you sleep okay?
All right, Captain.
Let's go to the briefing.
Sebastian is now a captain. In spite of their friendship, Jean-Charles respects the hierarchy. And here, he must make a good impression.
We're not at home. We're in a fighter squadron. We're definitely not at school anymore. We must be as close to perfect as possible.
Today is a big day. It's the first time that Jean-Charles sits in a fighter jet. This flight test is a tradition in the Air Force.
Some of them react really well, and others not so much.
The young students are not used to the accelerations.
But then you're human. If you vomit, it's fine. Just try to do it without making too much of a mess.
Here's the vomit bag. We'll see if I need it tomorrow.
Jean-Charles will take his Rafale flight behind Sebastian.
So here's the fighting vest for the Rafale. I'm going to let you put it on, and then I'll explain the details to you. You close it with the two small snap hooks.
As a good friend, he gives him precious advice.
You should avoid coffee right before your flight, even if you're not quite awake, but you need to hydrate.
And for pressing needs, the Army thought of everything.
We have bags, like Jean-Charles' vomit bag, that are specifically conceived for that. But you need to practice a bit, because the day you do that for the first time, in general, it's during a mission. We're delivering weaponry, and you better not miss.
Before climbing aboard the plane, he sits in this simulator. Jean-Charles already knows a thing or two about piloting, so maybe tomorrow Sebastian will give him the stick.
If I ask you to take over, you take over. And that's only if I decide to let you pilot.
I can't wait. This is already crazy.
For Jean-Charles, this flight in Saint-Dizier is quite special because he grew up here. Tonight, he meets with his family for drinks. And there's only one topic of conversation: his flight tomorrow.
You're like this with the snout?
What's the snout?
The thing to breathe.
For me, the snout is the pig's nose.
Sophie, Jean-Charles' mother, is even more excited than her son.
On a Rafale, can you believe it? This is amazing.
She's a nurse who became a teacher, and she is proud of Jean-Charles' commitment.
I'm a patriot. I deeply love France. And I am proud that my son is a French soldier and that he'll defend our country.
Even if the news sometimes forces her to imagine the worst.
I've talked about this with Jean-Charles, and I even asked him, are you afraid to die?
Of course there are risks, but the military training makes us train daily to deal with these risks, and we're not hotheads who are ready to fight at any time.
The next morning, Jean-Charles meets with Sebastian for his flight. And the duo gets on board a Rafale, the Rolls-Royce of military airplanes.
There's excitement and fear. We realize how big it is. We've been waiting for this for a while. Just being here, the motivation comes back.
Jean-Charles and Sebastian's Rafale will serve as the leader plane as part of a flying exercise and patrol. The two planes will take off at the same time.
Flight ready for departure.
This is a particularly dangerous moment. The planes are only a few meters away from each other.
And here he is.
Once they're 8,000 meters high, the pilot gives us a little taste of the Rafale's technology. He lets go of the stick.
You see, Jean-Charles, right now my hands are in the air, so the speed is automatically maintained. You're gonna say, autopilot sucks, you're not really flying, blah, blah, blah. But actually, it's so demanding to fly that if you can relinquish the control for a while, it's actually pretty good.
I figured, yes.
But to heckle his pilot of the day a little bit, Sebastian takes back the stick.
We're gonna do a little barrel roll. You ready?
All right. Oh, that's insane.
Now comes a series of high-speed turns. Jean-Charles seems to handle it pretty well.
Are you okay?
Yes, perfect.
But the second plane flown by a student is having some trouble keeping up.
He's having some trouble. If I pull on the stick, look. See how far back he is? See how he's going?
After an hour of operation, Jean-Charles' Rafale goes back to the base. So, Jean-Charles?
Hey, it has moves. It was really amazing. I mean, pure joy.
So you're made for the job.
Oh, it's not my decision to make.
I can already congratulate him for how he behaved behind me. He didn't bother me. He was nice. He held on.
The pilot trainee resisted acceleration of up to 8 Gs, 8 times his weight.
How much do you weigh?
I can't say, sensitive topic.
70 kilograms?
More or less, right.
So 560 kilos.
As early as tomorrow, a new piloting test awaits Jean-Charles. He'll have to give it his all because only the best get a spot in the fighter jet school. Back to the south of France, near Salon de Provence. Quentin and Talia's military training started 45 days ago. The student officers of the flight school are in the middle of a rappelling session. Quentin is used to the mountains. But down there, Talia, the Parisian, looks a little less comfortable.
Just like at home.
Above them, a student is stuck in a difficult position. His schoolmates try to help him. But he can't make it up the cliff. So as a good sport, he goes back down with a smile.
It's tough, but at the same time we're enjoying ourselves and learning a lot.
This test day is designed to make student officers face their fear of heights. The chief warrant officer does not spare them.
Don't help me then. I'm doing your job after all.
Talia, the recruit from the elite political science school in Paris, is having a bit of a hard time with the military spirit.
Sometimes it's difficult, but it's more interesting than sitting down in a classroom.
The young woman does not regret leaving her books behind for a more physical course. Civilian life already seems like a distant memory. How does it feel to wear the uniform, Talia?
J'ai plus trop l'impression de le porter. En fait, c'est plus bizarre de reprendre ses habits civils maintenant.
If they all wear the same uniform, some student officers have absolutely no intention of flying.
No, we're not pilots. We're gonna pilot our pens, maybe. Perhaps a rifle. But we'll see. The Air Force would do a lot better without pilots.
This is a rivalry in good spirit between future officers on the ground and fighter pilots. After almost 2 months of effort, they're at the end of their military training. Tomorrow, these students are going to live the first important event of their careers. They're going to become officers. And Quentin's father would not miss it for the world.
I still don't realize that I'm about to see my son here. He's going to become an officer today, and it's still not real to me.
Eric hasn't seen Quentin in 2 months.
How are you doing, buddy? You haven't changed that much. Maybe the hair a little.
The wing commander lets the emotion get to him, especially when his son puts on the same uniform as him.
Wait, don't move. Lift your head. Perfect. Very good. Perfect. Amazing. It's kind of weird to see him like this. When I see myself in the mirror, it seems natural. But you?
In a few hours, Quentin will officially become an officer of the Air Force. Like Talia, Eric meets her for the first time.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I'm glad to meet you. And I'll be at the ceremony. This is quite the privilege. I'm not shy about how happy I am to be here.
Parents can't attend the ceremony. Eric is a former student, and as such, has some extra rights.
Don't laugh, all right?
For his son, he wants everything to be perfect.
Perfect. At ease. You forgot a button.
Maybe we should do it again then.
Every detail matters.
When you salute, it's like this. It really has to be straight.
The flight school class is finally ready for the traditional ceremony of the daggers. The images of this initiatory ritual, reserved for the elite of the Air Force, are exclusive. It's in utter silence that Quentin and Talia's class receives these daggers. They represent the trust that the military hierarchy places in these young officers. They will one day be called to command the Air Force. On the other side of France, on the Atlantic coast, Richie, the pilot at the end of his training, now lives in Cazaux. He received his own dagger 5 years ago already. He now starts a new phase of his training, aerial fighting.
You're very pretty like that.
Hey, I'm late.
His roommate is also a student pilot, still in training, but they earn some money. Being a captain, Richie earns 4,000 euros per month after taxes.
To get dressed in the morning, it's easier. There isn't much choice.
The daily life of the two pilots runs like clockwork.
Checklist.
Phone, badge, wallet. Okay, all good. That's our training.
We can't forget anything. You know there's a summer and winter checklist.
Ready?
Good to go.
The two students are expected at 8 a.m. sharp by their instructors. For the first time, Richie is going to learn how to fire at the enemy. And as always, this takes place in private lessons with an instructor. Today he works with Major Roman.
We're going to go over the air-to-ground shooting methods and also the air-to-air ones. So you get settled. You do your checks as usual.
Rigged out as if he was heading on a fighting mission, Richie gets settled in this flight simulator.
We don't get this gurgling in our belly when we start the engine. We don't get sick when we're upside down, but besides that, it feels exactly the same.
At this advanced stage of training, 1 flight out of 3 is on the simulator.
Now the goal is to learn how to fire, so that's the next phase.
So learn how to wage war.
How to go to war, exactly.
From the control room, Major Roman observes Richie's every move. His first mission, bomb targets on the ground.
Here's his target, the circle here. After a while, you have to freeze. So block, block, block. Now you have to aim.
Several tries are needed for the pilot trainee to successfully bomb the target. The inspector can validate the impact points from this computer.
We have a transmission from the target. He shot here. It's pretty good.
Second challenge, shoot at another plane mid-flight.
The dark spot you see with the trail, it's the enemy plane. Is that all right?
It's going to be.
The missile was fired, and he'll follow up with cannon fire.
Richie seems a bit more at ease in his fighter jet.
I think I'm going to get used to it pretty quickly.
But learning the art of war is also about learning how to handle a crisis. At the airbase of Cazo, there's also a lake. Students practice here. This morning, Richie gave up his flight suit for this one in neoprene.
It's a little flashier. It's the new winter collection.
Richie is going to have to face a situation that every pilot dreads. His plane crashed in the water, and he must get out of it as quickly as possible.
You must be comfortable everywhere, on the ground, in the air, and then in the water, too.
Out of the 30 or so participants, one girl.
No one ever died, or so they say, so it should be fine.
This water course simulates the different parts of the plane that would be dislocated upon contact with water. To ensure his safety, Richie is followed by experienced divers.
When you're under one of these elements and you can breathe, you have to make the most of it.
As he manages to overcome the first obstacle, he hears a familiar noise. Are these planes taunting you?
They give me courage.
This stamina trial aims at testing Richie's capacity to manage his stress. Just like this apnea dive under a flipped-over Zodiac. First, the pilot must go into this barrel to catch his breath. Come back up to go back down right away. Grab this rope and cross this 5-meter-long pipe before finally going up to the open air and rejoin his canoe.
I'll be satisfied with this type of canoe. It's basic, but seems efficient and could save my life if need be.
If his plane sinks at sea, Richie will be alone, so he must know by heart the maneuvers that his survival will depend on.
I'm going to gather the side parts that we call the cape and find shelter inside.
The goal is to shield himself from the cold and humidity. For seasickness, there is a pill in the emergency pack.
Even if you're comfortable at sea, you should take them to avoid feeling sick and getting dehydrated.
In 10 years, only one French pilot survived such an extreme situation.
As they say, training is hard, but war is easy.
But for his first fighting mission, Richie is going to have to be a bit more patient.
It's going to take another 2 years to be ready to go on missions.
2 tough years.
Tough, but also enjoyable from time to time.
End of the exercise. A helicopter is sent to the crash zone to winch the pilots in distress up. This type of catastrophic scenario is an integral part of the fighter pilot's training. few days later, on the tarmac of the tourist base. The audience is quite large. It's the official ceremony that family and friends have been waiting for.
The captain successfully passed the different stages of his training, which is why today he will receive his fighter pilot's wings.
With his 5 classmates, Richie receives the prestigious badge of fighter pilot, while his parents and his fiancée Carolyn look on. Today you're the wife of a pilot.
Not yet his wife, but yes.
For Richie, it's the result of 350 hours of flight and 7 years of hard labor.
Well done, my son. It's a relief.
How does your dad feel right now?
Relief. Because even if we don't show it, we obviously share in his stress, so...
To take me on these mountain hikes, they helped me so much.
Today, Richie is realizing his childhood dream.
I am pretty moved and proud to finally wear these wings on my chest. It's the achievement of many things. It's the wings that now represent my arrival world of the fighter pilots.
Richie still doesn't know what plane the Army has in store for him.
This is the one we want.
Mirage or Rafale? His assignment will be decided according to his final ranking.
At least we're pretty.
Richie will soon join an operational squadron. One last year of training will be necessary before he can leave and fight in war zones. In Western Africa, for instance, where the French armed forces are fighting against terrorism. For security reasons, you will not see the faces of the pilots that we met. We are in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Since August 2014, fighter jets take off daily from this aerial base to detect and bomb terrorist hideouts on the ground. Between flights, the fighter pilots meet in this makeshift gym.
Our workout for today will be 8 exercises split up into 3 rounds.
And they let off steam with music. It almost feels like an aerobics class. But these exercises are not random. To avoid pain during flights, pilots must muscle up.
If you look at people who drive in their cars, when they've been driving for a while, they start to have aches due to their position in their seat. So they stop every 2 hours. Pilots can't do that.
During a mission, the French fighter pilots can fly up to 8 hours straight.
I can't hear you breathing.
Thus, pilots must get used to daily flights and shorter nights. Pierre is a newbie, the last one to arrive on the base.
It's a bit of a special rhythm at first, the climate change and everything.
Only a few months ago, Pierre was a student pilot, and in 2 hours, he will live his first war mission.
It's a mix of excitement. It's something we've prepared for a long time. You want to do everything you've learned, to apply it all, and there's a bit of fear also because, yes, it's the first time you're doing it.
Pierre is going to fly with a gun. If in France, pilots fly without any weapons, when you're in a war zone, you have to be ready for the worst.
You're never assured that you won't run into an armed terrorist group. Once you've ejected and you're alone, there's very little chance of that happening, but we're ready for it just in case.
The main difficulty for the pilots is the distance they have to cover. The Sahel is a region 17 times the size of France. To cover the entire area, pilots need to refuel.
It's a part of the flight that is critical to the mission because without this in-flight refuel, well, quite simply because of the distances, there is no mission. And at the same time, it's very tricky because it requires highly skilled piloting.
Refueling his plane will be Pierre's challenge. But he may also have to fire his first missiles.
If we fire today, we'll be to protect French troops under fire, so we're ready.
Pierre is going to pilot a Mirage 2000D, a two-seater plane.
We always fly with a pilot in the front and a navigator in the back.
The navigator is in charge of firing the weapons. Several air-ground missiles are aboard. For his first day of combat flight, Pierre will be in good company.
I have the advantage of flying with an experienced navigator who's already done a lot of war missions, so it's somewhat reassuring.
After 3 hours above the Sahel, Pierre is out of fuel. The refuel maneuver is very tricky. At 700 kilometers per hour, the pilot must introduce the pole at the front of his plane in this little basket. Pierre stows the pole on the first try. 10 minutes are needed for the Mirage 2000D to fill the tank. Thanks to this in-air refuel, the Airforce performed the longest air raid in history. A 9-hour, 45-minute flight from Saint-Dizier to stop a terrorist attack in northern Mali. It was on the 13th of January 2013. They bombed about 20 terrorist targets. It's what this elite training is for. Each year in France, around 60 young recruits receive their fighter pilot's wings.